All right, Palworld is good in a bad way. Critique. This was a kind of a weird video I really wasn't planning on making. Because, again, during the time, like, this dumbass Palworld game gets announced, it's like, what the fuck is this shit? Everyone forgets about it. And then, yeah, it gets, like, stealth announced, basically just like, oh, yeah, game's coming out, like, next week or so or some shit, you know? And then it's like, oh, dude, that fucking ghetto-ass Pokemon game's coming out. What's going on with that? And then, yeah, it comes out, and it's like, oh, wait, this shit's actually pretty fun. Like, this is a fun-ass game. So, and originally during the time, like, I was kind of curious because, one way or another, like, even in, like, I wasn't planning on making, like, a critique video, but, like, you know what I mean? Because, like, even, like, you know, even because if the game's shit, like, you know, maybe I can make a funny video, maybe like a funny uncivil synopsis or something, you know? I feel like this game was just like the perfect like material for like YouTubers, you know? It's like, it's such like outrageous bullshit, you know? So yeah, I ended up playing the game and, yeah, bro, it's fun. It's a fun ass game. Like I had a lot of fun with this game. I put like 80 hours into it and, yeah. And yeah, so because the game was really good, it sold a shit ton of copies. It blew the fuck up, like kind of out of nowhere, really. Like, yeah, the discussion around this game was really interesting, and so I kind of wanted to give my own take on it, and that's why I made this critique video. Because, again, like I mentioned in the Pokemon controversy video I made for Nintendo, this Palworld video is almost like an extension of that same discussion because, again, like, all the controversy surrounding kind of Pokemon as a series as a whole, like, the discussion of Palworld kind of got hijacked by, like, a lot of Pokemon fans or, like, Pokemon anti-fans, you know, who, like, were super hyping this game up and just like, yo, fuck Pokemon, we don't need Pokemon anymore, we got Palworld, you know, and, like, so then all the Pokemon fans got like hyper defensive of Pokemon, and obviously it's like such a blatant ripoff of Pokemon, you know? So like obviously like some people are going to feel a certain way about it, you know? So again, like the discussion around the game, you know, it was kind of popping the fuck off. Palworld was like selling billions of copies, not billions, but like, you know, millions of copies. They're going crazy, you know? And, yeah, I kind of just wanted to make a video on it because, again, it's like this, it's kind of like the same discussion. It's like a continued discussion of the Pokemon controversy video, you know? And again, I feel like I have a pretty unique perspective when it comes down to this shit because, again, like, on one end, you kind of have, like, Pokemon fans that are like, yo, fuck this game sucks, it's like such a ripoff of Pokemon, what the fuck is this bullshit? And then on the other hand, on the other side, you know, you have, like, anti-Pokemon fans that like hate the games and they're like, yeah, fuck Nintendo, fuck the Pokemon company, Palworld's the shit, we love Palworld, who needs this dumb shit anymore, like fuck Nintendo, fuck Game Freak, you know? And in my opinion, like for me in particular, like even with the Pokemon controversy video, like I fall into the middle, you know? I really am like a centrist, a quote unquote centrist on this shit because it's like, on one end, I do understand that, like, yeah, the Pokemon games suck dick. They look like shit, and, like, they play terrible, especially Scarlet and Violet. It's, like, running at, like, 15 frames per second. It's like, what the fuck is Nintendo doing? You know, not Nintendo, but, you know, what the fuck is Game Freak doing, you know? But then on the other hand, like, I don't really give a shit. Like, I really don't care that much because it's like, you know, it's Pokemon. Like, Pokemon's always been bad. It's always been this way. It's always been kind of a scam. It's like, why aren't all the Pokemon in one game? Like, the Pokemon series as a whole, like, throughout its entire existence, it's just been like, it's always kind of been like this, you know? And it's one of the many reasons why people don't really give a shit about, like, when Pokemon Sword and Shield, all that shit happened. Like, people went out and bought the game anyways because, again, dumb internet drama aside, like, it's just another Pokemon game and it's fun to play, you know? Same thing with Scarlet and Violet, despite how janky it is, you know? And again, like, as a fan of Pokemon, you know, I show up and the new Pokemon game comes out, I go play it and it's fun and, you know, that's about it. And that's all I really do. And, you know, so, yeah, so when I went, so again, and in Palworld, it's kind of like the I'm kind of getting the same experience where it's like, on one hand, you know, like, this is a great ass game. It's fun. It's really creative. It's like running at like a good frame rate. You know, it's running way better than Scarlet and Violet. You know, and you know it's delivering the like Pokemon Legends Arceus type experience, way better than Pokemon Legends Arceus was. And the graphics, like the graphics are okay, you know, but again, it's running at a smooth frame rate. It's really well optimized for early access. This game runs incredibly well for early access. It's kind of it's fucking insane. And yeah, so on one end, this game's great. It's a fun ass game for sure, right? But then on the other hand, you know, on the other side of the argument, it's like, but yeah, bro, this game, it's such a fucking scam ripoff game. It really is. It's like they're ripping off Pokemon. It's so obvious. It's like, you know, they're ripping off Elden Ring shit. They're ripping off Breath of the Wild. It's so blatantly a ghetto ass ripoff game. It really is. And it's hard. It's such a hard game to defend because it's so like blatantly obvious. And again, Pocket Pair, like this company, they're such dumbasses. They're so stupid. You like look back at all the games they made before and it's like, they made that fucking Craftopia game and it's like blatantly ripping off Breath of the Wild. So fucking obvious. It's like, these guys are such fucking scammers. It's so obvious. So again, like, I'm kind of like landing on both. And my opinion of Palworld, it's like right kind of in the middle. It's like, I kind of recognize both sides to the argument of like this game, you know? Cause like, on one hand, the game's great. But on the other hand, it's like a scam bullshit ass game, you know? But on one hand, it's like, yeah, like, maybe like they are ripping off Pokemon, but then like, you know, but like why does Nintendo own the rights to like making generic kind of Pokemon designs? You know what I mean? Like, because I would say during the time, the biggest argument as far as like, is this game a scam ripoff? It all comes back down to like the designs of the Pokemon, which like and as I explained in the video, like, yeah, sure, like some of them are definitely ripoff. Like there's that one that just like looks like Lucario. There's that one that just looks exactly like Cinderace, you know? A lot of them like are like blatantly like, it was 100% like, they were like, I don't think they were like directly like stealing the models or whatever, but they were 100% like they brought up a PNG of Lucario and they were staring at it, you know, and they're like, okay, on the other hand, and on the second screen, they had their, you know, modeling software. They're like, okay, how do we make this look like a Lucario type Pokemon? They 100% did that. 1 billion% they did that. And like, I don't blame them because again, like you're making a Pokemon inspired game. You want to make like a Lucario type Pokemon. You're going to make that in your game, you know? So I do get it, like, and honestly, I do think it's low key kind of fair play, like, you know what I mean? Because like if they put like an actual Pikachu model in the game, like turned it blue, you know, there would be no argument, you know, it'd be like that's just a blue Pikachu, you know, that's one thing. But with Palworld, it's like they did put in the work to like make things look like Pokemon, but not really, And again, like, as I kind of talked about, like, does Nintendo and the Pokemon Company own the rights to like a little penguin monster? Like, no, they don't, you know? It's like, yeah, this penguin looks like Piplup, but you know, but like, it's a fucking penguin, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and, yeah, so I kind of talk about this overall in the video and, talk about like, kind of like, and I guess the ultimate conclusion I come from this video is like, yeah, this game is kind of a ripoff, and Pocket Pair, they're super incompetent and like they're a dumbass game studio for sure. But also, like, why should Nintendo be able to like monopolize Pokemon as like a concept? Like, really, why should they have the monopoly on this shit? Because really, they really shouldn't, and they don't. And in a perfect world, they shouldn't have a monopoly on like the catching mechanics of Pokemon and stuff. It's just, it's dumb. And other people should be allowed to make Pokemon type games if they want to, because again, like, as I kind of talk about in the video, like that's how, you know, that's how the games industry evolved. Like that's how, you know, first person, as I mentioned in the video, first person shooters, Doom was the original first person shooter. And then people ripped off Doom, and then they made more for first person shooters. And then we got Halo, and then Half-Life, and all this crazy shit. And now it's just a genre of games, Now it's just Call of Duty comes out and like no one thinks about it, So again, like that, now it's kind of the conclusion I made. We're like, yeah, this game is ghetto and it's shitty, but like, bro, it's a fun ass game. It's doing enough unique shit. Like, again, like maybe you could mistake it for Pokemon, but like, again, when like the character's pulling out a fucking automatic machine gun, and, like, and obliterating this fucking, Pokemon, like you're not going to mistake it for Pokemon. No one's going to mistake this game for Pokemon. I'm sorry. Like no one is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this game is so stupid. Like, Palworld is so stupid. Like, no one's gonna mistake this for Pokemon because look how stupid this game looks. It's like you got Pokemon at like factories, like that's not what Pokemon is. Pokemon has never done that, So I guess at this point in time, as I'm making these commentary tracks, I guess I'll address the elephant in the room. Is we've now realized that Pokemon and Nintendo, they are now suing this game. And during the time, it was pretty clear that like they weren't really planning on, or like it's not necessarily that they weren't planning, but like it seemed pretty clear that like they weren't like immediately suing the game because, again, like as we kind of all know, like we've known about this game for fucking years now. Like Palworld was announced years ago, and it was like, so if Nintendo and the Pokemon Company were like actually planning on suing this game, like they would have done it by now, And I think the reason they ended up doing it, or they ended up ultimately suing this game, is again, it blew the fuck up. It made a shit ton of money, and now Nintendo wants a piece of the pie. They really do. Like, that is the reason why they're suing the company, because if this game didn't sell as well, and it kind of became like a Temtem type situation where like it gets a little bit of buzz, it sells a couple of copies, but nothing too crazy, and then it kind of fades off into obscurity. Like, I genuinely don't think Nintendo and the Pokemon Company would have sued this game. I don't think they would have. I think the reason they actually ended up suing this game is because, again, it like actually created like it captured a substantial market on PC. And again, these games are also coming out on like PlayStation and stuff now, so again, it's Palworld is blown up so much that like now it's like an actual competitor. So now, and it's made so much money on top of it. Like they're literally like putting out articles of like the dumb fucks at Pocket Pair just like we're making too much money. Like they're literally like they're like fucking that one fucking meme of like the fucking Dracula. It's like, you know what I mean? What the fuck was that? Dracula Flow. They're like that fucking meme. It's like, I'm making too much money. Like they're flexing and shit. They're like, you know what I mean? They're putting out articles like, oh, our company's so dumb. We don't know what the fuck we're doing. And like, we made all this money. We don't even know what to do with it. And it's like, they were just asking to get sued. They really were. And, but yeah, at the end of the day, Nintendo and Pokemon Company, they're suing Palworld because it sold a lot of copies, and that's it. Like, there was no genuine argument about copyright up until Palworld started making money. Let's just clear it right there. Like, that is what's happening. They made a lot of money, and Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, they want their cut. That is what they're doing. And the reason that's the case is because the way they're going about this lawsuit, from what I've seen, is so basically what Nintendo and Pokemon Company are doing is they're suing Palworld for game patents, which is kind of fucking, it's bizarre. It really is, because again, the argument up until this point, like most of the fans have, is like, oh yeah, like the Pokemon, they're blatant rip-offs of these existing Pokemon. And that was kind of the argument everyone was running with, where it's like, yeah, like they're ripping off the copyright for these Pokemon designs, and it's so obvious. And yeah, like I think the reason they're taking this game patent suing approach is because, again, like as I'm pointing out in the video, like they don't have as good of a case as like they might think they do, you know? Because again, like the little penguin Pokemon, it's like, oh, that's a ripoff of Piplup, you know? And it's like, but not really. And again, like you can kind of make the case, you can make that argument in court, and like there's a bit of a gray area that I feel like, you know, the Pokemon company, they don't want to step into, you know? So I think the reason they're going this like game patent approach is because basically what game patents are is they're basically like copyrighted like gameplay mechanics essentially. And the way they make them now is they're very like hyper specific. So it's like I'm really dumb. I'm not a legal expert, obviously, and I'm really dumbing this shit down. But like essentially, like what a game patent would be like one player, you know, player character, you know, sees wild Pokemon in the world and throws a Pokeball at it, and then it shakes to confirm the catch rate, and then after 3 shakes it catches and then lands on the ground. You know, like, but like even more specific than that, like, you know what I mean? So essentially that's what a game and you know, the Pokemon company would take that game patent of like the mechanic from Legends Arceus or whatever, and they would patent that gameplay mechanic. And then if anyone else tries to rip off Pokemon Legends Arceus, they could sue them in court and say, hey, we've patented this mechanic. You can't use that mechanic. And in practice, what the game patents are supposed to do essentially is what you're supposed to do is developers would see that Pokemon Legends Arceus and the Pokemon Company, they have this patent on this technology. And if they want to do the same kind of thing, you know, make like a Pokemon Legends Arceus style capture mechanic, they would have to go to the Pokemon Company and essentially pay like a licensing fee to use that mechanic, essentially. And that's what happens in practice. But in reality, what ends up happening is, you know, now they obviously you're developing a game. You don't want to pay this like exorbitant fee to catch a Pokemon or whatever, you know? So then either you do something else or you work around it and you hope you don't get sued. And that's kind of what happens in reality. So either A, you do that, which is kind of what Palworld did, or B, what ends up happening is you just don't do it at all. You completely subvert the game patent. You just never use it because you're afraid, you know, the Pokemon company is just going to sue you. So you just don't do it. And that's kind of how game patents work in reality, because a really good example of this is a Crazy Taxi. They have the arrow on the top of the screen that like leads you to your where the destination you're trying to go to and people you're trying to pick up. And during the time that arrow technology got patented, and essentially you could not, and it was a really good way to kind of lead people to the objectives and stuff. But because it got patented, then basically no one else was able to kind of use the arrow on top of the screen and do that, because then they get sued. And another good example is, I think another famous example is, like the mini games during load screens. I think that was a Namco one where essentially if the game's loading and you could play a little mini game while the game is loading, you know, but so again, what ends up happening in practice is Namco puts out the game patent on, oh yeah, during mini game, you know, while the game's loading, you can play a mini game, and we have a patent on that. But what ends up happening is now no one can do that. So, oh, what a great idea. You can play mini games while the game's loading. That'd be a fun idea to do. But now you can't do it because Namco put out the game patent. And if you make a mini game in a loading screen, Namco's going to sue the fuck out of you. So guess what? Now you're not going to do that. So this is why game patents fucking suck dick. They really do. And it's all just litigious bullshit. It really is. And again, I believe this 100% that if Palworld was not successful, then they would not be getting sued right now. 100%. Because again, like, you know, there's been so many like monster catching games like Pokemon that have come out that just weren't as successful, and the Pokemon company did nothing. Because again, it's just from a legal perspective, the game patent is just like a tool in their belt they can use like just to bully other companies. That's essentially what it is. And hilariously enough, I actually had a whole section of the video where I was going to talk about game patents and why they're bullshit in this video, but I kind of ended up cutting it because, again, it was kind of detail overload, and I kind of get the same point across in the video when I talk about Doom, where essentially the point I'm trying to make overall, and what I kind of believe ultimately, is like, even if the Pokemon Company and Nintendo are legally in the right to sue Palworld, and they can go to court and get a payout, and they can go about this all legally and it's fine, like, I don't think that's good. That's not a good thing. And I really don't think like the legality equals the morality of the situation. Like, you know what I mean? Because like, slavery was fucking legal. It was legally fine to own fucking slaves, but nowadays we know that shit. Like, that was a dumb idea, But that's kind of an extreme example, but you kind of get the point. Like just because the Pokemon Company is able to put out these game patents of like copywriting their game mechanics, like, and they're legally allowed to do that, and they're legally allowed to sue other people who like kind of get close to copying their stuff, like, that doesn't make it right. Like, it's bad for the industry as a whole. It really is. And because as I point out in the Doom section of this video, it's like that the entire industry is built off like, borrowing concepts from other games, and that's how. And again, as a consumer of games, it's like more games the better. Like as consumers, we're better off with Palworld being a game and also Pokemon being a game, because now Palworld's a competitor. So now the next Pokemon game, they're going to really have to try to fucking make it run well, Like, they're not going to be able to put out Scarlet and Violet and have it run at 15 frames per second, because now Palworld is out here and they put out a game and it runs great. So now the next Pokemon game, it better fucking run well, So again, even though this game is obviously such a clear ripoff of Pokemon, like, as a fan of Pokemon, you're better off having Palworld exist, because now it's putting pressure on Pokemon to put out a better game. You know what I mean? And again, that's basically what even though that bit kind of aged a little bit bad, that's basically what that statement was. Like, hey guys, shut the fuck up. We'll handle it. Like, that is what they were saying. And again, like I point out in this video, bro, like, they legitimately did not have a case. As far as the Pokemon design copyright stuff is concerned, they didn't have a case. I really do believe that. Because again, I think they're like, if Nintendo's going to court, like, they're planning on winning for sure. And I think with the Pokemon designs, there's just a bit of a gray area where like you bring it in front of a jury or whatever, like, maybe they might not disagree or whatever, like there's a room for where things might not go their way. Whereas I feel like the game patent stuff is like kind of a tool they have in their back pocket where they're like, okay, like, we got them on this shit and we're going to sue them for this, So in my mind, like, I do think Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, like, they're going to get away with this, and they're going to get a nice hefty chunk of change out of Palworld. And yeah, I don't know, maybe for the next game, or maybe as this game enters out of early access, maybe they might change the capture mechanic a bit to like avoid that game patent or whatever, but you know what I mean? Like, but at the end of the day, like, I think Palworld is fine. Like the game is going to continue existing as is. It's not going to get taken down. And if it does, like, that's fucking stupid. If it gets taken down, that's fucking stupid, but it really shouldn't. And I don't believe it is, but yeah, it's just lame. It really is lame. And again, the whole discussion I was talking about with game patents in this video was originally going to be about Pong, the original Pong. Because believe it or not, the original arcade port of Pong was a fucking ripoff. It was a fucking ripoff. Let me look this up. Pong. Fuck, what was it called? There was some ghetto ass game console back in the day. Pong. I'm literally gonna look this up right now. Shit, I should have looked this up. Yeah, the Magnavox Odyssey. So essentially, the Magnavox Odyssey, it was basically a super old ghetto-ass console, and it had a game mode called table tennis. And what table tennis was on the Magnavox Odyssey, it was just Pong. It was like a shittier version of Pong. And so what ended up happening was, I guess the CEO of Atari or Atari during the time, did Atari put out Pong? I think they did. Yeah, the CEO of Atari, essentially what they ended up doing was they were able to kind of get a sneak peek of the Magnavox Odyssey, and they saw table tennis, and they're like, and what they ended up happening is when they basically ripped it off. They ripped off the Magnavox Odyssey table tennis game and turned it into Pong for the arcade version of Pong. So the arcade version of Pong, the most successful game ever made, the most famous video game in the world, was a fucking ripoff. It was a fucking blatant ripoff of this other shit. So guess what ends up happening? You know, the Magnavox Odyssey guys, they saw Pong blowing up, and they knew Pong was a ripoff. It was a shameless ripoff. They knew it. But guess what they did? They sat back, they did nothing, and they waited for Pong to become the most popular fucking arcade game of all fucking time. And then they sued him with a game patent. And Magnavox's Odyssey game patent essentially was like, it covered the mechanics of Pong. But the argument during the time from Atari's perspective was that, oh, well, this isn't a game console, this is an arcade. And the arcade version of this game, it uses completely different technology, and the way it renders the graphics is completely different. So it's not the same patent that Magnavox Odyssey had for table tennis. And ultimately what ends up happening in court, I'm kind of dumbing this down. I hope I'm right, but what ultimately, I hope I'm remembering this right. But ultimately what ends up happening in court is that what the ultimate conclusion is that even though the Pong arcade cabinet renders the graphics differently and uses different technology to render the graphics, and it's kind of like completely different technology than the Magnavox Odyssey, in the spirit of the game patent, Atari Pong is ripping off table tennis from the Magnavox, right? Because again, it is the same game. Like, it is for sure the same game. So in spirit, that's kind of like a beautiful kind of interpretation for like video games as a whole. Cause, you know, it's like, yeah, sure, it uses different technology and it's on a different, you know, system, you know, but in spirit, it's like the same game. And that is kind of like a beautiful interpretation of the law. And that kind of set the precedent for game patents, or like game patent kind of lawsuits during the time. Cause again, during the time, you know, Pong, like video games, they're like a brand new thing. This is kind of like the first kind of lawsuit of its kind. And this kind of set the precedent for game patents, I think. Maybe there's a couple, I don't know. I'm kind of talking out my ass here. So, yeah. So what ends up happening is Magnavox, you know, they get a giant payout for, you know, getting their shit ripped off. But what ultimately ends up happening over the course of, you know, the game patent's existence is, you know, they become giant assholes and they just sue the fuck out of everyone. Because the game patent they had for Pong was incredibly vague. It was incredibly vague, that so vague that it almost applied to like every fucking game ever made, like during the time, because I don't remember the exact details, but essentially it was something along the lines of like, a symbol that the player controls can move on the screen and then interacts with a moving symbol, another moving symbol on the screen, and based on how it hits that other symbol, it affects the direction of the projectile symbol's movement or something. Essentially, it's just describing how Pong works, right? Because you have the paddle and you move the paddle, and then based on the direction you hit the ball, that determines how it moves. or how it moves towards the other player. And that's essentially what the Pong game patent looked like. But if you believe it, but as you can tell, like as it sounds like that basically sounds like every fucking video game ever made. Like that's like what baseball is. Like baseball, you have a symbol, the person who's going to hit the ball, and the pitch, the ball that the pitcher's throwing, that's a symbol. That is the ball. And then the player hits the ball in baseball, and then based on the way the player hits the ball, that's going to determine the way the projectile then moves away after being hit. And it's like, so now the Pong game patent is now legally being able to sue like an Atari baseball game. You know, it's able to sue a racing game. You know, it's able to sue all this other shit that like isn't even fucking Pong. And it's complete fucking bullshit. And they're totally getting away with it. The original patent holders for Pong, they were able to get away with all this bullshit because, again, the patent was so vague, it basically applied to like every fucking video game ever made during the time. And what ends up happening with game patents is because game patents only hold out for like, I forget the duration, maybe like 15, 20 years or so. And then after that time passes, like it's basically free play and it doesn't matter anymore. So at some point in time, that patent expired, and then none of that shit mattered anymore. And the same thing with the Crazy Taxi patent and the Namco minigame patent during load screens. That's all expired now, and anyone can do it, you know? But again, it just, during the time, it creates just this logistical bullshit where just everyone's getting sued for no reason for a Pong, you know? So again, like, and again, what I want to reiterate in that Pong section of the video that was cut was that like, or, you know, like Magnavox Odyssey, you know, it's a table tennis. The game is table tennis, right? You know, like Magnavox Odyssey, they didn't invent table tennis. Like, what the fuck is this bullshit? Like, they didn't invent table tennis. They didn't invent, you know, tennis as a game. Like, what the fuck? Like why the fuck are they allowed to like, you know, because like if someone else makes a tennis game that sort of works differently, like, so now like because they put out this bullshit Pong game patent, like they're just allowed to sue every other tennis game ever made. Like, that's fucking bullshit. It's fucking dumb, right? So again, like in that Pong situation, like who's the good guys and who's the bad guys? You know, because on one hand, yeah, Atari CEO, he got caught red-handed because essentially how they found out they blatantly ripped off Pong is when they did a preview of showing off the Magnavox Odyssey, like they had a guest book that they signed, and the CEO signed that guest book. So they caught him red-handed. It's like, bro, you saw this shit beforehand. And that's how they found out, basically. So yeah, who's the bad guy? Like, yeah, the Atari CEO, he low-key, he ripped off Pong, 100%. But then on the other hand, on the other hand, like, the reason Pong became popular in the first place wasn't because of the Magnavox Odyssey. It was because Pong was an arcade game, you know, out in the open. It was a social experience, you know, like you'd be at a bar and there'd be an arcade thing of Pong, and you know, like you would have a quarter and like you'd sit down at the Pong cabinet, and hey, there'd be a cute girl over here by the bar. It's like, hey, get her a drink, yo, let's go play some Pong, you know? And that's why Pong blew the fuck up. That's why everyone knows what Pong is. No one and in fact, the reason people ended up buying the Magnavox Odyssey was because Pong was super popular. And people went back to buy the Magnavox Odyssey because Pong was super popular. Again, because Atari blew Pong up. They're the ones who made it popular. So now people are like looking back at the Magnavox Odyssey like, oh shit, like this has Pong on a home console. I want to play Pong at home. So they went back and bought the Magnavox Odyssey. And that system would have sold fucking nothing if it wasn't for the Pong arcade port that ripped off the Magnavox Odyssey. So again, like, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? You know what I mean? It's like, on one hand, Atari did rip off Pong, but it also made it really popular, which ultimately also ended up helping out, you know, Magnavox Odyssey. But then on the other hand, Magnavox Odyssey, you know, they got their shit stolen and they deserved payment for that. But now they're also suing all these but then they use that game patent to like legally fuck over all these other companies that had nothing to do with that shit because the Pong game patent was so like vague during the time. So yeah, at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's game patents are just kind of bullshit. They really are. And yeah, to kind of end out the discussion near the end of this video, like, yeah, like, even though like Pokemon and the Nintendo company, they're legally in the right, like, it shouldn't be a thing. It really shouldn't. And it's kind of bullshit that it is. And it's understandable that, like, you want to make a game and you want to protect it because, you know, it's a creative experience. And you don't want people just blatantly ripping off your game. So it does make sense why game patents exist. But on the other hand, it's kind of bullshit. Like Pokemon, like the Pokemon company and Nintendo, they shouldn't just have this like pseudo monopoly over Pokemon. They really shouldn't. And like other games should be able to make Pokemon like games if they want to. You know, it's kind of bullshit. And I do agree with this ultimate conclusion. Like, people should just play Pokemon. If you like Pokemon, play it. If you don't play it, you know? And, like, shut the fuck up. And I do ultimately agree with that conclusion. Yeah, so overall, Palworld is good in a bad way. I kind of, like, didn't even talk about this video in this commentary track. But, yeah, I think this critique's really good because... But I do think it was interesting to talk about. In Palworld, it's such an interesting game, so... I do think this video is great. I do love this video. And I guess we'll have to see what ends up happening if Palworld gets sued successfully or not. But yeah, we'll have to see, you know. Moving on.